Hi, we're here at Devoxx Belgium with John Smart. John,
Hi.
Thanks for joining us today.
It's a pleasure.
And John is, let me get this right, you're a developer, consultant, trainer, general, manival.
That sort of thing, yeah. Bit of everything.
But today you've been talking to the audience about behaviour-driven development, right?
Yes, that's right.
In the main part. First of all, kind of just for our audience, what is your definition of behaviour-driven development?
So behaviour-driven development is a method, an approach, an idea. It's the idea of using concrete examples and conversations around concrete examples to try and discover where the real value comes from out of your requirements, out of the features you need to build. So you're focusing on building the features that actually matter and make a difference. In a nutshell, that's where it all comes from. And then there are techniques around test automation and automated acceptance criteria and living documentation and documenting technical documentation at a low level that comes out of the code from the tests that sort of flow on from all that. But at the essence, it's all about the conversation. Okay,
so it's looking at people around you. It's not being kind of working in the silo and kind of...
So it's getting, in a nutshell, you can say it's at the start of a sprint or an iteration. You'll get the developers, the testers, the BAs, the product owners together. They'll have a bit of a chat about what needs to be done, and out of that they'll get a list of acceptance criteria. But that chat is also questioning the value and trying to understand, make sure everyone understands what needs to be built. Okay, so it's very inherently tied to kind of being agile and kind of that kind of methodology and way of thinking. Very much so. So it is very tied in with agile, and doesn't work very well if you're trying to do it in a siloed environment. And can you kind of give us an example of a situation where behaviour-driven development, can you think of any kind of companies or organisations where you've kind of seen behaviour-driven development come in and kind of change the way a process is done? Well, I was working with a big bank in Australia, national sort of federal bank, and they were very conservative, very traditional organisation. They were moving to agile and Scrum, and they wanted me to help them introduce BDD, and they were going from a normal status quo of getting dozens of bugs going into production with each release to 0 bugs in production for every release and only 1 or 2 bugs into UAT. But it's more important than that. That's just sort of the numbers. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. I think BDD is more about getting that common understanding and focusing your efforts on getting software out the door that's actually more meaningful than if you try and second guess the requirements and aren't really sure, and you get a lot of misunderstandings along the way. Yeah, so it's better just kind of throwing it out there and hoping for the best. Yeah. And what were kind of the main points of your talk today? Obviously, you did kind of explain to the audience. I did 2 talks. So one talk was on the theory of BDD and then a bit of practice, and the second talk today was basically an example of how you do test automation with web testing using BDD tools. So in the first talk, the essence was basically end-to-end BDD. So going from how you have a conversation about requirements, what the acceptance criteria look like, how the acceptance criteria lead to automated tests and also lead to your development processes, and that flows on to unit testing, whereas the unit testing, that's really BDD in the same way as you got BDD at a high level, you got BDD at the coding level. It's just that you're not talking to business owners or product owners, you're talking to other developers, but you're still basically describing your specifications in a form that's executable. And what do you think are the biggest struggles people face when implementing BDD? Do you think there are any kind of repeated stumbling blocks? I know with agile principles there's often a lot of places that people kind of veer wildly off the methodology. I'd say the most common problem when people start to implement BDD is they don't really understand that it's about the conversation, it's about understanding the goals first and foremost, and it's not necessarily the automation. And so they'll dive into doing cucumber tests or using JBehave, and then think they're doing BDD because they've got a whole lot of cucumber tests. And in fact, the cucumber tests are merely a way of doing test automation, and they'll end up testers doing cucumber acceptance tests or cucumber functional tests, which are very brittle and fragile because they haven't been done from the outset with that conversation, thinking in terms of business goals and thinking in terms of high-level requirements. And then when they do that, they get confused and they find that they think the BDD doesn't work, but in fact it's their way of doing it, which is not really optimal.
Yes, it's kind of it's not them, it's you kind of scenario.
Sort of, yes.
As we mentioned before, you are a trainer, or you do sessions at kind of events like these, but you've also developed some courses for parlays, haven't you, for people that kind of really want to get into the thick of BDD and really get those granular experience of learning.
Absolutely. So on parlays, that will be coming out soon, there'll be some courses on automated web testing, because one of the trickiest things with automated web testing is getting it to work 6 months down the track or 3 months down the track, and writing them in a way that you can understand them and keep them maintainable and keep them reliable. And so one of the courses is about writing web tests that are reliable and that are easy to maintain. And then there'll be a second test more on the BDD principles and the BDD automation practices using Cucumber and behaviour and tools like that. So those should be coming out in the
So would you recommend these for kind of BDD? Would you recommend that for an individual developer, or do you think that would be kind of more for someone who works in an enterprise or a kind of a startup and they want to work out how to implement that in their team?
For the test automation, it would be really useful for anyone who wants to have basically who needs reliable software that's not in a permanent state of flux. Sometimes startups, the software is changing so frequently that BDD is hard, the automation side of BDD is hard to nail down, but the conversation is very important. So maybe the conversation or the theory side will be more important. And in more enterprise context, where it is large software that's going to stay in production for 10 years, and you really do want those regression tests, then the test automation techniques become much more important. So it's a bit of both, really.
Okay, so kind of a different level of people that would kind of tap into that. And
yeah.
I guess the beauty is as well, isn't it? You can kind of go in and out, you can swap over, so you might have
and if you've got some experience with WebDriver already, you can go into the more advanced sections of the course.
Just jump ahead.
And and there'll be options to choose only the more advanced module and not both modules and so forth. So that should be enough. Should be something for everyone.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Enjoy the movie tonight.
Thank you.